I love that. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Zinni 62 Media Oakland News Now. And, well, Oakland News Now, Oakland Focus. We have 16 blogs this is going out to. Interview with a very important Oaklander. In this case, it's Rashidah Grinage, who is the coordinator for the Citizens Police Accountability organization at
Coalition.
Coalition for Police Accountability. Thank you. And I'm going to start right off the bat. First of all, I'm glad you're here. And tell people about the Coalition for Police Accountability and what it does.
The Coalition for Police Accountability is a coalition of organizations in Oakland that came together to put on the ballot in 2016 the measure that created our police commission. And since then, we've been monitoring the police commission and supporting it. And we're now involved in promoting the police commission's measure to go back to the voters in 2020 to add on requirements that were omitted in Measure LL in 2016, most especially staff. They need additional staffing. It was provided for in an ordinance, but the city administration has refused to implement the ordinance that the city council passed that would have given them the staff that they need. So we have to go back to the voters to get it. So this matter is coming forward on Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. The city council will be choosing from among 3 different versions of a draft to go to the voters, and we are supporting the draft that the commission has put forward, and the coalition has joined in that. So that's what we're going to be pushing folks to do, is to get on the Zoom meeting Tuesday at 11:30 and say we need to have on the ballot the version of this measure that was presented by the police commission. That is the person that we want. We're not going to accept the other versions, and we're not going to campaign for them if the commission's version is not chosen.
And I'm probably supposed to put coalition version of.
It's really the commission's version that the coalition has signed on to.
Commission, got it. I'm writing that in the notes here that I always would see there. What, in that context, do you think of the city auditor's report on the Oakland Police Commission?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but a lot of it had to do with timing. The commission got off to a difficult beginning because the city offered them absolutely no help when they were first seated. The commissioners were named in October of 2017. Their first meeting was in December. Between the time that they were named and they first met, the city did nothing for them. Did not set up email, did not set up web page, did not provide training, did not provide orientation. They did nothing. And so basically these commissioners, who are all volunteers, who have day jobs, were thrown into the deep end of the pool without any lessons in how to swim. That was basically what happened. And since then, they have been scrambling, they've been fighting, they've been pushing, and they've been working. And they have finally found their sea legs, and now they are starting to work really well. But unfortunately, the period of time that the auditor reviewed was largely the period of time when they were struggling. But the blame for the struggle should not rest on them. It should rest on the city administration. The city administration steadfastly refused to provide support, even when the council members went to them and said, your staff person doesn't even attend police commission meetings. Why not? And that never made a dent. Never made a dent. To this day, the staff person working under the city administrator does not attend commission meetings and does not report to the commission. She reports to the city administrator. And this is what needs to get fixed. And the city council tried to fix it when they passed an ordinance. The city council, the city administration has simply said, ordinance? What ordinance? We don't recognize the validity of this ordinance because we believe it violates other sections of the city charter. So we're going to ignore it, which they did. And that's why we have to go back to the voters.
My God.
Yeah, exactly. My God is right.
Have they given any reason for this? Well, really illegal behavior because you're ignoring your own law. You know,
Exactly.
not you, but
you know what? I wish I could say this was unique, but frankly, there's a great deal of evidence. If anyone wanted to look for it, Zenny, there's a great deal of evidence that
I got the hint.
Yes, this is not the first time that the city administration of Oakland has ignored an ordinance or a resolution passed by the city council. In fact, I would go so far as to say there is a pattern and practice of doing so. And a lot of folks can tell you that have experience with trying to get ordinances and resolutions implemented properly. That includes community policing. It includes roads, traffic patterns, you name it, all kinds of commitments that were made by the city council that were never actually put into practice. And of course, in some cases, they will say, well, we didn't have the budget for it, or we didn't have the staff for it, or whatever. But there's always an excuse. But more often than not, the council never becomes aware of the fact that what they thought they passed has never actually entered reality, that it remains in a file and is ignored, essentially. So that's what's happened here, and that's why we need to go back to the voters. But given the national conversation right now,
I just want to put something together in my head that I think people need to understand about what you're saying.
yeah,
The electorate selects a council member.
correct.
The council member designs an ordinance. The city staff is supposed to follow the ordinance. So basically, the city staff is ignoring the voters who put the elected in office.
Exactly. You nailed it. It's not very, different than what's happening in Washington. And so what we have is people who are not elected by anybody running the show and ignoring the legislators. And that's what we have here. We have essentially that the legislative body who is elected is essentially ignored, and their ability to affect change is compromised when what they have legislated doesn't get implemented. It's almost like nullification, that the administration nullifies the legislative intent of the city council. And that's really undemocratic, clearly, and unacceptable. But they've been getting away with it for decades. For decades. So at some point, and frankly, I don't think Oakland is unique. And I think that one of the reasons why it is so difficult to get reforms in the police department is exactly for this reason. Because the city council is prevented from actually directing any department of the city. All they can do is give direction to the city administrator, who then in turn is supposed to direct department heads. And if that doesn't happen, then the city council's role essentially is nullified. That's why all of the agitation that we're seeing now for police reform, the rubber is going to have to meet the road somewhere. And frankly, jurisdictions are not really set up to deliver what is being demanded of them. That is why it is important to have police commissions who are outside of the control and the repression of the city's administration, who is always joined at the hip to its police department. And if there's going to be any change in this country along the lines that are being demanded, more and more jurisdictions should be looking at Oakland, should be looking at Measure LL, should be looking at putting on the ballot a measure to establish an independent police commission that has the authority to do policy for police department as well as discipline for officers who engage in behaviors outside of policy.
Oh, just one note. Don't worry about if you see that 0 up there. People will see it. It's just the timing of the day, but this becomes a solid video. It's going to get bounced around a lot. So it's already up. Also, people get popped in because I'm just putting it on as we talk. So yeah, just FYI, that's all. But continue. I'm sorry. I want to make that note.
I was just going to say that Oakland has a history of leading on social justice, and the Oakland community voted for its police commission with 83% of the voters in 2016. And so we understand that not every jurisdiction in the country is as progressive minded as the community of Oakland. However, I think that what we've seen in the last week or two is pretty strong evidence that many other jurisdictions are waking up. A lot of cities have civilian oversight, like Minneapolis, for example, but the nature of that oversight is advisory only. So it means they have no real power. And my understanding of the oversight body in Minneapolis is that they seldom, if ever, sustain allegations against police officers. And here we've seen the results of that. And so what's needed is a police commission that actually has power, actually has authority, and absent that, we're not going to have what is being demanded.
What struck me about
what, Zenny, my battery is not happy right now.
Okay. Do you want to call me and do it voice wise so I can put you on voice here? I can do that.
Either that, or you can send me the link to my laptop and I'll do it on my laptop instead of my phone.
Sounds great.
So send it to my Earthlink, Rashidah, earthlink.net.
Okay. I'm doing it right now. Give me one.
Okay.
And at earthlink.net. Okay. And I'm saying link here. Link.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
Okay. And I have just sent the email to you. And yeah, it's on its way. There. Oh. So folks, Rashidah's switching not platforms, but devices. She was using her phone, but as you know, things go, the phone is, and so she's going to switch to her laptop. I just emailed her the link, and so she should be back live, if you will, rather than virtual, momentarily. The Oakland Police Commission is the most powerful of its kind. Here we go, I think. And one moment, please. The most powerful of its kind in America, but it's running up against a kind of I call it a shadow government that spans the police force and the city administration. That works to, in a sense, protect the police. And I think we've seen from current events nationally that needs to be altered. And because under that, not necessarily in Oakland, I think Oakland's improved quite a bit, even though we still have quite a ways to go. Still, we can do a lot better. We have to do a lot better. So, the mayor put out on email let me see here. If I go to that, okay, I don't see. All right, link has been out there. All right. So anyway, if I go back to when I worked for the city of Oakland and Oakland Mayor Elihu Harris, that was prior to the rioters, but we didn't have the same. We were not blessed in the late 90s with social media. AOL was a new thing. And so you would hear about police brutalities in a hearsay fashion. There were no body cams. So the atrocities that are committed and that we there's ample evidence to back any claim going on a lot. Okay, a lot. And so one moment, please. I have to send the code out. Okay. And I'm not going anywhere, folks. So let's see here. I have to do this. When I say send a code, there's StreamYard has a code that one has to send so that you can bring in your guest. Okay. And yeah, so she has a new code, and so should be in momentarily. Back momentarily. Yeah. So at any rate, yeah. So as I was saying, there's ample evidence that atrocities and probably worse went on during that time. And if a person didn't know to come to city council and talk about them, they were never addressed. There was no police review commission. There was no police commission. There was no citizens review board. There was talk of one. There's been talk of one for a long, long time. Now we have it. But I shudder to think of the events that went down before we had it. Okay, here she is. Here she's back. And so this I'll remove. Welcome. It works. Yeah. I was saying to my viewers off camera that I was saying that I shudder to think of what the Oakland police were getting away with in the late 90s when I was working for Mayor Harris. We didn't have social media. There were no body cams. There was no citizens police review board.
There was actually.
Oh, okay. That's right. You know what? There was because people did come, but we didn't have the same teeth, if you will.
That's right.
From the perspective of communications technology. I mean, if we had the social media we have now and the tech we have now,
right.
And there are a lot of reasons regarding pipeline and bandwidth that just wasn't happening, I think we would have had a different situation even back then.
Right, and that's why we had to go to the ballot. And this is what other jurisdictions need to learn. Most jurisdictions have what we had, which is a police review board that is advisory and that can be created by ordinance because it doesn't really change the structure of the government. It still vests power over the police department in its managerial system, in the mayor and in the city manager. And adding a review board doesn't change that. And what that means is that the review board can act in certain ways, can look at policy, can look at certain complaints, can investigate complaints, can audit, can make reports, but at the end of the day, they cannot implement anything. That they are simply an advisory body, like many other bodies that most cities have, like a rent board or a housing commission or arts commissions, whatever. They present suggestions, they present advice, but it's up to the city powers whether or not to take it and to use it. That's what we had here in Oakland. That's what most cities have, including Minneapolis. And obviously, that is not enough to change behavior on the part of the police department. That's why our coalition, created Measure LL and got it on the ballot in 2016 to create a body that is not advisory, that actually has power, has independent power. This police commission was really the reason that the police chief got fired by the mayor. The mayor knew, really, the mayor knew that if she didn't fire her, the commission would. The commission notified the mayor that they had cause to fire her. And the Measure LL that created our police commission gave the commission the ability to fire the police chief with cause. The commission notified the mayor that they had cause, and the mayor joined in the termination. And by doing so, because the mayor can fire at will, the causes for the chief's termination were never made public. That was the mayor's choice. The mayor chose to do the firing in order to prevent the misdeeds and incompetence of the chief from being disclosed, because the mayor is on record as saying that this was the best police chief of the 7 she had ever worked with.
I'm sorry.
So in order to kind of defend herself, she did the firing so that the misdeeds and the incompetence of the chief would not be made public.
In that context, I'm just curious, what do you think of the now ex-police chief's press tour where she's taken off after the commission? Does the mayor now have cause to be able to say, okay, she's criticizing us, now here's why I fired her?
The mayor could do that, but she seems to be not of a mind to do that. She's still standing by her. And it is, frankly, incomprehensible. This police chief that was just fired took a department that was 3 tasks away from complying with the federal oversight agreement and brought the police department backwards to now being over 8 tasks away from being in compliance. So instead of going toward compliance so that we could get out from under federal oversight, which is 17 years old, she brought the department backwards. She put the department in reverse, if the department can be seen as an automobile. She put them in reverse. And so for the mayor to stand by this chief and say to the judge that this was the best police chief she had ever worked with is remarkable. And no one is holding her accountable for that. But my point is that if there was no police commission, that chief would still be here. That chief would still be here. That mayor was standing behind her no matter what. And the mayor would never fire her. And if we didn't have a police commission with the authority to do that, Ann Kirkpatrick would still be our police chief. But that is the importance of having a police commission with authority. And to do that, you have to go to the ballot because it requires changing the charter of the city to take power away from whether it's the mayor or the city manager and give it to a police commission requires a change in the charter. It cannot be done by the city council. It has to be done by the voters in that jurisdiction. But that's what needs to happen across the country. That is the single most radical thing that can happen in every city in this country, is to have an independent police commission with authority to make policy and to discipline.
I like your take on this. I found that the timing of the release and the production of the city auditor's report suspicious because, and I told this to some people that I talked with who work at the auditor's office. I said it seemed like there was someone who was upset that the police commission fired the police chief and therefore decided they were going to sort of get even, if you will. Am I off base?
Well, we can only speculate, and it's not clear to me who set the timing. And I don't like to get into speculation, especially if I can't verify. But and frankly, I'm surprised that they did release it this early. I thought they were going to release it on the eve of the council meeting next Tuesday, like the mayor had done the last two times when the ballot measure was under discussion, and she sent out her e-blast the night before, urging people to send letters to the city council to reject the more progressive version of the ballot measure and to weaken it, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I thought they were going to do that with the city auditor's report. I thought they were going to drop it the day before and use that as a weapon. So frankly, I'm surprised that they did so early. But in the intervening time, I think nobody cares about the city auditor's report right now. What they care about is what's happening on the streets of Oakland.
Right.
That's what they need to care about. That's what they have to care about. And when you have over 20 organizations that have signed a letter, which I'm about to send to the city council as soon as we wind up here, over 20 organizations that say we need the commission's ballot measure, not the stripped down version and not the city council version. We need the police commission's ballot measure. And if we don't have it, and that's not what you put forward, then we're not going to be part of any campaign in November. We won't support it. And that's what 20 organizations throughout this community are saying to the city council. You stand with the commission or we're gone.
You said approximately 14 minutes and 22 seconds ago that the city was, I believe, 3 actions away from compliance, and now we're back to 8. What were the 3? How give my viewers something to chew on?
This is a pop quiz, and I didn't study for it.
I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
Yeah, I think one of them is the racial profiling issue. As you know, the city hired Jennifer Eberhardt from Stanford to collect data on the stops of the vehicle stops, to understand the racial proportions of the people who were being stopped, whether they were searched, whether any contraband was recovered, etc. And they put out an extensive report in 2016 that demonstrated a significant racial disparity, not only in the race of people who were stopped, but in the number of people who were searched, whose vehicles were searched. And it turns out that even though they were stopping many more Black people and searching many more Black cars, what they were recovering was substantially less than what they recovered in other races' vehicles. So then the question is obviously, then why were you stopping the car and what was the basis for the stop? So a lot of recommendations have been put forward by Jennifer Eberhardt. And one of the results of those recommendations was that the police decided to stop fewer vehicles. So they are now favoring or focusing on what they're calling intelligence-led stops rather than mechanical stops like brake light out or, that an equipment failure, right? So now they're only focused on intelligence-led stops, meaning that they have some information that gives rise to the appropriateness of pulling over a vehicle. And as a result, they have lowered what they call the footprint. Namely, they're stopping many fewer cars than they were before. So because they're stopping fewer cars, that means they're stopping fewer black motorists as a result. True. However, the disparity remains. So even though the total number of cars that are being stopped is fewer, the disparity between the races of people who are stopped remains the same. And the judge just asked them about that last week. He said, how do you explain this? How do you explain this? And what do you plan to do to address it? So the police department's answer now is, we're going to bring in the Department of Race and Equity to help us. So essentially, they're outsourcing the responsibility to Darlene Flynn, who is the director of the Department of Race and Equity, and Dr. Eberhardt for an encore. And they hope that by working with Director Flynn and with Dr. Eberhardt, they will somehow come up with a formula for how to fix this problem after 17 years. So that is one of the things that is still out of compliance. Internal Affairs is still out of compliance. They're still missing deadlines for completing investigations within 180 days. There's also an underreporting of the use of force. There is a lack of supervisors looking at body-worn cameras within 2 days of incidents about which there's a complaint. So there's a lot that has slipped out of gear. And all of it happened under Ann Kirkpatrick. And the mayor just didn't want to see any of it, didn't want to hear about it, didn't want to know about it. Head in the sand.
Your evaluation causes me to ask a question regarding something that I found particularly disturbing in the auditor's report on page 51. And it said, and I remember it by heart, I don't expect if you have, but what it said basically, to just distill it, is the police commission needs to follow Robert's Rules of Order. And because of the Oakland police chief had an idea for getting accreditation for the department, and yet the commission sort of poo-pooed it. And when I read that, and I worked for Elihu Harris and Jerry Brown at a time before the internet, when Hugh Bassett was coming to the city council and almost getting a fist fight with Larry Reed. You remember what I'm talking about? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And I'm thinking she is upset about a few people, speaking their mind, when I remember times at city council, we had to pull Hugh back from going up there, and then Larry's going to come down and they were going to juke it out. So
here's the question. Here's the question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why do you have someone from the city attorney's office at the commission meetings, if not to remind them about Robert's rules? Mm-hmm. Right? Robert's rules. That's why they're there. Whose responsibility is it? If the commission steps outside, it's the city attorney's responsibility. Just like the noticing problem for the discipline committee. That was the city attorney's fault. Ryan Richardson is his name. His fault, not the commission's fault. That's why you have an attorney. These commissioners are residents of Oakland. They're not city employees. That is why you have someone from the city attorney's office to guide them. So if there's a fault to be had, the fault should be aimed at the true target, which is the city attorney's office, not the commission.
And the auditor, the auditor didn't do that. And then, as I pointed out to one of the people I talked to, I said, "Why are you rubber stamping someone's thin-skinnedness when they're elected officials, they're public officials? They are, by technical legal definition, limited purpose public figures, and a person can say anything they want to. But that aside, the public expects them to handle a problem where they have been violated by the police, perhaps physically. And so under that, I think it's disrespectful to the police chief, and also for, I don't want to go on a rant because that's not fair to you, and it's outside my own bounds, but for Sabrina Landry to say that she's quitting because, they hurt her feelings. I'm saying, what have we come to?
Well, there was a lot more to it than that, obviously. Two words come to mind: ghost fire.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, here's what we've seen with Sabrina, with Chief Kirkpatrick, ex-Chief Kirkpatrick. What we see is a pattern of deflection. That when they're in hot water, when everything is gone over the edge of a cliff, it's somebody else's fault. It's someone else's fault. It's the commission's fault. It's a commissioner's fault. It's the public's fault for pushing them to do something they shouldn't have done, right? It's always someone else's fault that they have failed in their responsibility. In Chief Kirkpatrick's case, she blamed the monitor, the federal monitor. This is a monitor who was chosen not by Jim Channon and John Burris. This monitor was chosen by the OPOA because he's a former police chief. So they thought, okay, this is our guy. They chose him. And now everything is his fault. That they're not in compliance is his fault. Is his fault. The fact is that the monitor's reports, where he cites all of the deficiencies, is based on the reports that are created by OPD's own Inspector General. That's who's doing the auditing. The Inspector General of the police department is doing the auditing. He's the one, or she's the one, who discovered the underreporting of the use of force. So it's a lot easier, of course, to blame Warshaw for reporting it. But he didn't generate this information. It was generated by within the police department itself. So Ann Kirkpatrick did a great snow job of displacing and deflecting responsibility to everyone in sight but herself.
Wow.
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry. The mayor put out a note on Facebook now approximately 1 hour and 10 minutes ago that stated that she had signed President Obama's petition, if you will, or pledge to review use of force tactics, in this case with the Oakland Police Department. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, she can easily sign it because it's already happening. The police commission has been reviewing the use of force policy for the last 5 months. So that's been done. Mayor Schaaf, no need for you to worry. The citizens of Oakland who created its police commission have it under control. It's being done. It was begun 5 months ago. So again, Oakland is leading the way. Oakland is leading the way.
And as we close out of respect for your time, a message to Mayor Schaaf, what would you like her to do specifically?
You know, what I would really like Mayor Schaaf to do is to say, because she has always said to Judge Orrick how much she values the police commission and how important the police commission is as the successor agency to the court after the NSA is vacated. So I would say, Mayor Schaaf, to demonstrate your respect for and appreciation for the important role that the police commission plays in Oakland, please endorse the police commission's ballot measure for November. Please send your letter of support to the city council and say, my support of this police commission means that I support the ballot measure that they have put forward. And that's the one that I would hope the city council will put on the ballot in November. That will be the proof of your commitment, Mayor Schaaf. And anything less than that, like the e-blasts that you've been sending out, only demonstrate the hypocrisy of your position, where you say one thing to the judge and another thing in your e-blast. So which is it, Mayor Schaaf? Are you standing with this commission or aren't you? And are you willing to make it stronger or aren't you? And if you are, this is the time to signal your support for the ballot measure that is being advanced by the police commission, that is supported by the Coalition for Police Accountability and 20 other community organizations. The ball's in your court, Mayor Schaaf.
Well said, and I'd love to see the mayor follow along with us. It would be great. It really would. Mayor,
absolutely.
Libby, get it done.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Much appreciation.
Hey, don't go anywhere. I'll show you how to get out with cleanly out of this technical thing.
Cleanly.
Folks, subscribe to Zinni62 if you haven't already. Bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com, and we'll be back a little bit later. Thanks.